scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you shut up the kingdom of heaven, for you neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye devour widows' houses for a pretense, make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you compass land and sea to make...
Hello, good day. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing our study today in Matthew 18. It's a little cold in here today, so I'm wearing my grandpa cardigan. All right, so let's pick it up with chapter 18, verse 1. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whosoever shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whosoever shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe unto the world because of offenses! For it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. Wherefore, if thy hand or foot offend thee, cut it off, and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire. And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. For the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99, and goeth into the mountains, and seeketh that which is gone astray? And if so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep than of the 99 which went not astray. Even so it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again I say unto you, that if 2 of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence. And he laid hands on him, and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me that thou owest. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet, and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And he would not, but went and cast him into prison, till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto their Lord all that was done. Then his Lord, after that he had called him, said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desirest me. Shouldest thou not also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his Lord was wroth, and delivered him to the tormentors, till he should pay all that was due unto him. So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if ye from your hearts forgive not every one his brother their trespasses. All right. So we have an interesting parable and also a collection of sayings here. So, of course, one of the famous ones, there's a couple of times when they talk about who's greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Who is great? And the answer is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven is the least in the kingdom of heaven. Meaning, and again, someone who makes themselves least, just as Christ was servant of all. He was servant of all. He served for all our sins. And that's quite a lot of service. And whosoever will be great among you must become your servant. But also there's another aspect of this, which is not just service, but become as a child. And in what aspect as a child? Well, it says here, humble himself. Humility is an exceedingly important characteristic. Without it, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. And that's an important lesson, since the latter part of this chapter is about grace and pity and mercy. And also it's embedded in the question of forgiveness of sins, right? Because it requires pity and forgiveness. But also, in forgiveness of sins, there is the necessity of the one who wants to be forgiven, one, to want to be forgiven, two, to seek forgiveness. There's always a presumption in that the one who is looking to be forgiven, the one who is to be forgiven, seeks to be forgiven. And that's pretty clear about what he says. When the fellow servant in the parable comes the second time, he says, Forgive me, I will pay all. It's not saying, loose me from my debt, though you can be loosed from your debt. Instead of making you pay all, you can just say, I just forget it. But then again, Christ indeed looses us from our debt of sin. But that does not mean we don't owe him a debt of service. Even though we can never pay back. We'll never pay him back and get ourselves free. That's what people don't understand. And that's why, it's even understood when people talk about Satan, they talk about Satan not wanting to serve in heaven. There is service. There's no ruling in hell, though. You also serve in hell. There's no escaping the idea of service. And in that embedded also as a child. Like, why should man worship God? Why should children obey their parents? because it's what's best for them. And worshiping God is what's good for us. Listening to their parents is what's good for children. A proud child obviously is a problem because they think they can do everything, obviously, but the point is he's probably got a very small child. In fact, as children are smaller, their humility is, it just increases exponentially because they don't have anything to be proud of and they don't even understand the concept. They are simply just learners, explorers. They can't, of course, children can be sinful, and they are. From the mother's womb, they go astray, as the scriptures say, and I've observed it many times. I've had 8 kids. Children are sinful. People, they're innocent relatively. They're not necessarily sinners on par with any adults, obviously, but they're selfish. They can be cruel. They can do all kinds of things. And certainly, now they may not be cognizant of what they're doing entirely. And so in that sense, they are innocent, but they do things that for an adult would definitely be sin. Right? So we're not going to imitate that aspect of childishness. Being childish, being capricious. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about their humility, or the humility of most children, especially small ones. To realize your position in the world. That I'm just a little man who needs to understand a lot. I'm just a little human being. I'm just a little child, and I need to learn. I need to grow up. And that's one of the things that it takes, I think, to please God as a Christian. You got to understand that you've been born again, right? And you didn't get born again a full-grown, and in a sense, I always think of this entire life, just like Jesus is already on the throne. I'm not really born again. My rebirth, I think of as coming in the resurrection, because that's where I'm truly putting on a new body and entering into a new life. But we already have a new life in the Spirit, right? So there's different, I don't want to say levels or stages, something like that. There's different aspects of new birth. Some take place even now. Some are waiting for the new body. But we can certainly put to use everything that God has given us now. So there is a spiritual kingdom to be entered into. There is the outward obedience, which we can certainly improve on. Until we bring captive even every thought to the obedience of Christ. That's the level that Paul put it at. Taking captive every thought. These little ones which believe in me. He's comparing, I got to think, because he's talking about not just small children, but the least of your brethren, so to speak. The least of, like Jesus said, well, he's going to say in chapter 25 when he says, for as much as you did it to these, the least of these, my brethren, you did it also unto me. To the least of my brethren. It doesn't have to be to some great important person, but they do kindness even to the least of Christ's disciples. And Christ's disciples, because Christianity is not an elitist religion. It is meant for common people, of course, because it's from God, it's not from men. It is meant for common people. It is meant for, though of course there are aspects of the practice of Christianity which have been taken advantage of by men, of course. Just like all religion, it is used to serve man's interests and manipulated for that purpose, just like Satan manipulated the scriptures. So men manipulate the scriptures for their benefit. They certainly do. But the point is, we want to become like a child in our humility and understanding that where we truly are. Children kind of know they're kids. That's one thing for sure about their humility. They know they're not adults. They maybe like to pretend to be adults, but they know deep down where they are. We should know where we are in our new birth. Where accurately understanding, like to be able to see when you have a beam in your eye. Some things. I always thought it was interesting in the Discworld books, which are an interesting satirical look at a variety of subjects. There's a character. The character of Death is an embodiment of a skeleton with a sickle and all that stuff, right? But when people see him, they delude themselves into thinking they see a normal person, because it couldn't possibly be a great tall skeleton there with a, and it's only children that can actually see him for what he is, though they all see him, because they haven't been conditioned enough by life to sort of be habituated to normalcy. That's another thing, is that like, sometimes people have said this, believe as a child, right? That's not what it says. But in a sense, there is a humility of believing without seeing, so to speak. You know what I mean? To be believing without all kinds of evidence, with very light evidence. Children believe anything they're told. So, the fact that people have gone after the tendency of a child to believe things wholeheartedly as part of this, I don't think is out of order. I remember a friend of mine, a pastor, always kind of took a bit of offense at people thinking that it's the child's belief. But they do believe in him. Even though it talks about their humility, part of their humility is going to show up in the way they believe. Because a wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. And the lack of faith often comes from, there are a lot of people who are, for whom their atheism is a matter of pride. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to believe in God without some good old evidence. I need some real evidence to believe in God. And, I'm not throwing too much shade at them, because though I believed in God, I would have lost my faith without some good evidence that God exists. And so, yeah, I understand that desire. Because as a wicked person myself, I know that how much a sign can influence you towards righteousness. It's like, well, God is real. I better get on the straight and narrow. Children, though, like when I was a child, I believe what my parents told me. Why wouldn't I? I'm a child. So, children receive things humbly. Because they don't know better. They tend to be credulous. They'll believe what you tell them. I remember I terrified a child playing the steal your nose game with her. Absolutely lost her mind. That was my first encounter. That was like, I was 20 years old. And I hadn't really had much to do with children since I was a child. Didn't know much about them. So, we need to humble ourselves. Be willing to learn from God. Be willing to learn from other people. Like I said, I don't think that it's like, like I said, I try to, not like I said, but I would like to say, being willing to hear other people's point of view, not being threatened by it. Because, there's no threat out there. Jesus is Lord. He's on the throne. What are you worried about? Sometimes people get all worried and get all knotted up about, like when they argue about the word and stuff, they don't keep their cool. They get angry. They call names, use rude, speak rudely and roughly to people as they should not. No more your Christian brothers than the unbelievers. You should use, unless through a lot of provocation. Sometimes there's call for a little bit of, let's call it a highly descriptive language, okay? But, and it feels good to put the proper description on things sometimes, especially when things are out of hand. That's not the same as giving someone a tongue lashing or insult or trying to get under their skin in some way. And you're not trying to do the Lord's work. You're just trying to get yours back. That's often what people are doing. They're trying to get theirs back, I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to make them feel as frustrated and angry as I feel. Well, you know what? That's not really the way of the, that's not the way. It's not the way. Bridle your tongue. Whosoever shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. Again, when he's talking about children, is he talking about actual literal children? Probably, in a certain sense, because it's not like But receive. How do you receive the children? I think often I think of it as new believers, but like I said, not just necessarily new believers, true believers, because like I said, I want to always be a new wineskin. I always want to approach the Lord as a little child. You know what I mean? I want Him to have pity on me. I want Him to take me up on His knee and explain it to me real simple. You know what I mean? I am a child. I want you to deal with me as a child. I will become as a child. And I think that is right. We are children in God's sight. If we think of ourselves too much as men and adults and grown-ups and elders and all that stuff, call no man your father upon the earth, as far as, people who want to be called father. They need to consider themselves children. I am a child. In fact, the more authority you're in, the more a little child you ought to consider yourself to be. Because now there's even more stuff you don't know about. Now I'm in a position of leadership and power. Boy, when I had no leadership and power, I had enough trouble. Now I've got even more trouble. Now I've got even more responsibility. I need to be even more open to the Lord's leading. I need to be even more dependent on the Lord. That's another thing about children. They're completely dependent. And they're humble and they understand that. I need my mommy. I need my daddy. And we need the Lord. And so we should truly be that at all times. We should be children in the Lord's sight. And when we become children, then we, like he said, if you don't humble yourself, he calls us little child, except you be converted. You got to change and become as little children. That is paidion, which is the diminutive of child. It means small children, not necessarily infants, but 2-year-olds and such, 4-year-olds, little children. As a young child. There is a word for, I don't think that refers to infant. I could be wrong. Let me just check that real quick. I'm not going to bring it on screen. Paidion. Yeah, it talks about the child. Let me see I'm just going to look up I can't do that in this. I got to do it in the other one. I was going to look up the word infant in the New Testament, see if they ever had an infant. And, unfortunately, the term does not occur in the Bible. Luke. Luke 18, huh? Infants, it's probably it's probably paidion there. I need something with context. Luke 18 ain't going to help. Something with context that would show me what that means. A little child in training applies a younger child. Okay, well, whatever. Here, let's go with what they say. Here's what they say in the good old Helps Word Studies. Oh, come on. Why aren't you coming up there? Huh. That's strange. There we go. Okay, finally. I don't know what happened. Something happened to my thing, so now it's all like weird. See that? Oh, you can see that. That'll do. That'll do. Here we go. All right. I don't know what happened here. Okay, so here's what we want. Just paidion. Properly a child under training, the diminutive from 38:16. Pais, child, is paidion. A little child in training implies a younger child, perhaps 7 years old or younger. So I'm saying is like, you understand, when they say children, pais, that's going to be 7 and older. And then young man, teknion, which is like you're talking late teens up to, or somewhere, wherever they become young men to when they become guys like me, who are full, 50 years old or 40 and older. Because actually, teknion refers to men under 40. It means younger men. At least it did in Greek. I just say it because there are people out there who are playing around with the Greek and they don't know what they're talking about. All right, great, Paul. Sorry, I'm in trouble here. There we go. Oh boy, how exciting. What a lot of dead air. Okay, we got to become his children. And if we don't, we're not even going to enter in. That's like exclusionary. It's exclusionary. That's how serious that is. We have to realize our position before God. He is our Father. People always think about who's going to be greatest, who's going to be great, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And it's like, well, the one who humbles themselves. That's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso receiveth one such little child, I mean, those who humble themselves in my name, receiveth me. And when we properly align ourselves with Christ, we are his representatives. And they that receive you, receive him. And they that reject you, reject him. Like a lot of things, you take care. Whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me. See, there it talks about their faith. These little ones that believe in me. Humble and faithful. It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck and that he was drowned in the depth of the sea. Offend here, I mean, you could read it differently. I mean, it doesn't have to be scandalon. Yeah, let's see. Offend is, again, scandalizo. To put a snare in the way of. To put some sort of thing that caused them to go off track. And a wide variety of applications. Obviously, offense. We usually think of people getting offended like they're personally upset. Like, I'm offended at that. That's sort of, but that's one of the lightest forms. That kind of offense is people being overly sensitive. Offense actually means where it really screws you up. You know what I mean? Like when Jesus talked about people, the seed that was sown among thorns. Or with no depth of earth, right? When the sun comes up, and that represented, of course, tribulation and persecution. What, they're offended. They no longer, they stumble. They stop following Christ and go in another direction. You know what I mean? And so, a little one offend one of these, cause them to stumble. And that could mean, and what he might mean is sort of in the least sense. Because I don't think he means, I'll cause them not to inherit God's kingdom. That's not what he means, obviously. Because he says, these are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. But whoso shall cause to stumble, offend, it means to do harm in some way. You know what I mean? Maybe not in a sense of casting a stumbling block before their face. Or, or whatever. A lot of times people do put this in terms of like, they'll quote this verse in relationship to pedophiles and stuff like that, right? They'll say, oh, it's better for them. And I certainly think that's on some level, yeah, of course. There are things that are really bad. But he's thinking of it in a different sense here right now. It's not about literal children. It's about his spiritual children, right? And so, they can it says they shall stumble, but they should be hoping with a little hope. We can stumble, and it doesn't necessarily mean sin. It can just mean they put difficulty in our way. They put things in to try to prevent our mission. Or whatever. I don't like taking the track where they're actually drawing us away from Christ or something like that, because that doesn't make sense to me. To be offended at Christ. They cause you to be offended at Christ. Well, here's the thing. There is a sense in which that does happen. There are children who believe in Jesus, They go to church. They're raised in church. And whatever it is the church people do to them, when they become adults, they don't believe in Jesus anymore. And when you think about that, wow. If I was a parent in that situation, I'd be like, what did I do? How did I cause my child that believed in Jesus to stumble and to stop believing in Jesus? Did I have anything to do with that? Or because a lot of times you might not have anything to do with it, but it's certainly worth taking a look and thinking about it and being introspective about it. I was introspective about it at the beginning of my parenthood. So I started thinking about that long before it was an issue. And that's a lot of problems. You got to think about them ahead of time if you don't want them to actually become a problem. Once you wait till something is actually showing its colors or whatever, it's actually manifesting, you kind of miss the boat. Once you have your teenagers rebelling against you in your home, that's already a failure of discipline. Discipline means they're going to respect you even into their young adulthood. I had no problems with that. Small problems, okay? Problems I was able to deal with. We didn't have any teenage rebellion. I'm certainly not in any overt way. And not in any covert way per se, like meaning like some sort of passive aggressive stuff. I've had them maybe speak a little bit in a way to me that I didn't like. Maybe that happened once or twice. But not much. I said. So, when I raise my children, to me, that's also important. They believe in Jesus. I don't want to be responsible for them turning away from Christ. But a lot of parents are. They have a lot to do with why they're the overbearing mothers and overbearing fathers. For some reason, I am cynical about whether or not what they're doing is even based on faith. Like they're masking it in faith, but they're doing it for some other reason, for their own personal. There's there's something else going on. Like why? Because it's like I can't imagine someone who's actually thinking would want to make their child miserable with the Bible. And it's not even necessary. A lot of times, sometimes parents, they want to make their children little perfect examples of something or other. And so they try to make them better than they ever were. I certainly tried to make my kids better than me, but I didn't do it with threats and things that might cause them to stumble. I did it with gentle instruction and goodwill, patience. You got to be, you don't want to offend your children. You don't want to give offense to anyone, especially those who believe in Jesus in some ways. So, there is a way that could be true. It could be offense as in terms of turning them away from Christ. But like I said, when he's talking about one such little child, I don't think he's really talking about children. He may be it may be both is what I'm saying. Maybe both it's literally true of actual children and also that it's spiritually true of the spiritual children. In any case, it goes to that thing. It's like when someone does you serious harm, God does take notice, And I look at that, like any serious harm, a stumble, scandalizing, fall into some sort of negative experience, some sort of trap. They bait you and then they trap you. I think about the people who swindled me the last year. I've prayed for them and felt sorry for them because bad things are headed their way. I just assumed that because it's like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. The fact that you're even set up to do that means not good things for you. Yeah, it'd be better for them if a millstone, it'd be better. Now, again, when he says things like this, like a lot of things Jesus says, you understand when he talks about, there is a certain amount of hyperbole. Is it really better for a millstone? I don't know. You want to go find out? It's just saying that it's the worst thing. That's usually what he says. It's like, When he says it's better for him that he was never born. But never born is like what you think of. Like I said, to me, that's the worst thing. Never having been born. You know what I mean? Nothing. You get zero. That's an absolute zero. There's no pluses in that entire category of not existing. Right? It would be better for him that he was never born. Well, all that says to me, though, it's better. It's even worse than the worst thing. Same thing here. It's like, he just mentioned something that sounds really bad. You want to imagine having a heavy stone hung around your neck and thrown into the sea. That's got to be quite terrifying. I saw that in a movie once. A guy had an anchor tied around him, and they threw the anchor in, and then it dragged him in. Pretty awful. Man's inhumanity and cruelty to man. But the thing is, that's a pretty harrowing experience, but not as harrowing as it's going to be to fall into God's hands when you've done offense to his little ones, the ones that fear him, the ones that are humble before him. Woe unto the world because of offenses. Yeah, the things that people do to hurt each other, to cause each other to stumble, to cause each other to fall into evil. That's truly what I think it means, is like to trap someone into some evil snare. You know what I mean? To bring evil upon them. That's probably a great way to put it. Scandalize offenses means to bring evil upon someone, whether that be through deceiving them into bringing evil upon themselves, or whether it's direct evil. Because sometimes with traps, there's deceit involved. Sometimes there's no deceit. It's just, there's concealment, right? But the point is, it's about trapping people, about ill will towards them, about bringing evil upon them. That's what that offense. You do evil, you bring evil. Woe to the world because of this. It must needs that offenses come. It's inevitable. It's part of the world that God made. But woe to that man by whom they come. Because when God makes you the man who brings offenses, that's no good. You don't want to be that person. Because you still answer for it. You're still culpable. People understand. If God has done all these things and made the world and then why does he yet find fault? For who has resisted his will? This was asked in Romans. Right? Why does he yet find fault? Because no one can resist God. How can he still find fault with people? Because they're faulty. Like Paul said, nay, but who are you to reply against God? He makes one vessel unto honor and one unto dishonor. The dishonorable vessel. I used to make the analogy of, he makes one vessel to be a serving dish and another one to be a clay pigeon. You know what a clay pigeon is? That's something that I put into my thrower and it shoots it into the air and then I can blast it out of the sky with my shotgun. See, it's a vessel intended for destruction. And if it goes to destruction, it's no great thing if it goes to destruction, because that's what it was intended for. These as natural brute beasts made to be taken and destroyed. There are certain roles that people play in the world that God has created, which is not good for them. And they don't have the wisdom to get out of it, and God ain't going to send it. He made, just like he made the devil, he made evil people. There are evil people. Now, careful when you see those, people say, well, the enemy made them. Well, the enemy sowed them, so to speak. But ultimately, God is at the bottom of everything. Satan helps the wicked with his temptation, helps them be wicked. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh, the one who brings evil. We don't want to be that person. It's the offenses must come, but you don't want to be the one giving offense. And so he says, wherefore if the hand or foot offend thee, causes you to, either sin or causes evil to come upon you, in a more neutral sense of the offense. It's both. Because sin is harmful, ultimately, and harm is not good. We don't want to fall into harm. So he uses, again, this is, like I said, when it says about the millstone, when it says about the eye, I don't think he ever literally meant to do this. Unless it was true, of course. But the thing is, your eye does not make you to offend. Your foot does not make you do offend. Your foot is not leading you astray. Okay, nobody's foot has a mind of its own, and your feet aren't taking you into the massage parlor. Your hands aren't guiding you into the liquor store. None of that is real, right? Your eye is not the one leading you astray to lust. It's your heart, and you can't pull your heart out. You have to circumcise it, and even then, that's tricky because how do you do that? With man, such things are impossible, but with God, nothing is impossible. So turn to him, and he will cut off the sinful parts of your life so that you can be whole. Right? It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed. Again, this is I don't think this needs to be taken literally. You're not going to enter into life actually. Does anyone, now that's what I'm saying, does anyone actually believe that if you cut off your hand in God's kingdom, you're going to have one hand? Right? Do you really believe that? Well, no, right? It's not even open. Rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet, to be cast into everlasting fire. That is, hellfire here is Gehenna of fire. Gehenna. Or as it's called in the Old Testament, Tophet. For Tophet is ordained of old, for the king it is prepared. He hath made it deep and large. The pile thereof is fire and much wood. The breath of the Lord of hosts, like a stream of brimstone, doth kindle it. From Isaiah. That's Tophet, the valley of Hinnom, the place of burning. It answers to the lake of fire in the book of Revelation and is entirely distinct from what we think of as hell, Hades, or Sheol, which is the grave. Unfortunately, in the New Testament, they used the English word hell to describe both Gehenna and Hades, which are 2 very different concepts. Not completely different, but when you consider the fact that in Revelation it says death and hell are cast into the lake of fire, you understand that there is quite a distinction. There's a greater distinction between Gehenna and Hades than there is between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, okay? They're more one and the same than that is. And they're not one and the same. They're one being. 3 persons, as we understand it. So he's not telling you to pluck out your eye, because it wouldn't help. You can pluck out your eye and might show your devotion. And actually, such an experience like that can be quite, having a traumatic experience often is life-changing. Plucking out your eye might make a difference, though I don't recommend it. Because, again, he's being somewhat facetious when he talks about, better to pluck out an eye. It's better to enter into life with one eye than having 2 eyes go in hell. He's just saying, again, it's better to lose your life in this world and gain it in the world to come. Whatever it takes to get sin out of your life, you should do. Even if it means cutting out your eye or cutting off your foot. It's that extreme. It's that important. That's what he's saying. That's how top shelf this is. You should be willing to do something so extraordinary as he describes. That's how, whatever it is in your life that causes you to sin, to stumble, to be offended in that way, to offend God, in a sense, to make an offense by falling into a snare, by falling into a pit, by falling into sin. Whatever it is that triggers that, you should excise it from your life. Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones. It's easy to despise your brethren because they don't understand the scriptures like you do. I know because I used to do it a bit, And it says, those of you with understanding don't despise those who, those who, let him that eateth not despise him that eateth not, and let him that eateth not judge him that eateth. Those who are weak and judgmental and legalistic are not supposed to sit in judgment of those strong who understand spiritual things and who are not afraid of eating different meats and putting on diverse clothings or whatever. Understanding that those things are passed away and nailed to the cross with Christ as far as any of the laws that would pertain to anything, really. I mean, the whole law is just no longer in effect. It's the new law, and it encompasses the old. So it's not like that. It's not important. It's just that that's not the standard on which we're judged, and which we're trying to make ourselves conform to. So yeah, do not despise. It's easy to despise people who don't know as much as you. You know, a lot of times new believers, they have a lot of faith, but they don't have a lot of knowledge. You know? And also me, I got, you know, if I'm also seeking to be a child. You know? And I mean, whatever, I don't need to go down that road. But the point is, it's like the people who believe in Jesus, the humble ones, the ones who are his servants, don't despise one another, especially for, you know, someone, don't despise them for their weaknesses. Just as a child has a lot of weaknesses, inherent. And I don't mean sinful weaknesses so much, though that also, right? Don't despise people for their sinful weakness. Don't despise them for their lack of knowledge. All these things can be made up. Don't despise people for any of their lack, but rather pray for them. In heaven, their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. Now, this is a verse that people have that's caused people to come up with the idea of the guardian angel, right? That every child has a guardian angel that is watching over them. I don't really subscribe to that idea per se, but it seems to be something like what he's saying. You know, it's like their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. That there is a messenger. That's what angel means. And I don't know if it means like their prayer messenger, so to speak, or if it means, I don't know. But what it's saying is that those who would bring, let me put it in terms of making you understand that what this means, though. That the message that comes to God, like, hey, someone is mistreating one of your little ones. That message, that knowledge coming to God always has his attention. When someone mistreats one of his little ones, the angel that is reporting that has God's full attention. That's what it's saying. I mean, the angel that reports these affairs to the Lord of what's going on with it, whoever of his servants this is, they always behold his face. That means he's not busy doing other things. He's looking right at them. They see him to the face because that's got his attention. So don't worry about, you know, those who despise you and use you and despitefully persecute you. They're the ones who need help. They're the ones who need prayer. They're the ones who are in deep trouble. Deeper trouble than they probably even understand. You know, and we should be able to have confidence in that and understand that, yes, the message that comes from the message that says, hey, your servant is being mistreated, that's got his attention. Why? Because the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. And that's the thing is, like, what is one of the first, like, if I say child, what's one of the word associations? If I say the word child to you 10 times, you're going to be little child, right? And maybe somewhere in there, you might associate the word lost. A lost child, right? What could be more vulnerable than a lost child, right? Because they don't know the world like, you know, and we got to understand that we are like lost little children also. We're lost. We don't understand what we're doing. We don't know where we're going. We don't have any knowledge like we ought to have knowledge, right? We got to say we are unprofitable servants, for we've only done that which was required of us, if we can claim that. And so that's the child, you know, as we go about our lives, and we get into sticky situations, the Son of Man has come to save us out of that. You know, like when I was in college and I thought I'd hurt myself so badly I was going to die. I turned to the Lord in my desperation at the moment, and I felt better, and I felt I owed him a debt from that point of service. And in that I see, you know what I mean? It's like I was really lost and getting more lost. Even though I knew Jesus, I was straying from him. You know what I mean? Like I said, I was definitely, I don't know if in some senses, my father, definitely regarded me as somewhat of a prodigal child. Somewhat. Because I never really truly left the faith, but also I was never really, well, I didn't consider myself, I think somewhere in the back of my head I wanted to serve God or something. I thought that maybe was a bit too high for me or whatever. The main thing was I was mostly interested in the ladies. So I was not really looking for, I was definitely lost in the world. But I believed in him in my simple, ignorant way. I read my children's Bible, and I read even a bit of the real Bible. A bit, anyways. I know I read Genesis and some of the Gospels, and Kings and stuff like that. The stuff that's easy reading. Joshua and Judges. He's come to save that which was lost. If a man have 100 sheep and one of them be gone astray. It's interesting how it segues from the children aspect to this lost sheep. And like the idea of lost as a child, but I definitely see a connection there. He's come to save that which is lost. And sometimes we need God's attention to look for us, right? We need to behold his face so he can come get us out of our offended situation. We have fallen into offense. We've offended him. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the other 99, and go into the mountains, and seek that which is gone astray? He goes after that which is lost. And he rejoices when you find that which is lost. It's just a point about, that's human nature. When we lose something, and regain it, we have a lot of rejoicing, right? Because of like we have that fear, it's going to be lost. Now, we do this for different reasons, but what he's saying is that even though, like, I hope that's not. All right, there we go. Even though we do it sometimes in other ways, there's also rejoicing in heaven, like he says in another place, right? There's more rejoicing over one sinner that repenteth than over 10 righteous men or whatever. Because it is something when a man, well, and also when he talks about righteous men, he was talking about the righteous men of his age. There's really none righteous, no, not one. We who seek righteousness understand this more than anybody. Like I said, even if I do completely come into alignment with Christ, I have a whole history that's only covered with his blood. So I can't, you shouldn't get all prideful just because you're obedient to the basics of what Christ asks. Oh, I do no murder, I do no adultery, I don't steal. All these things have I kept from my youth. I'm a righteous man, I should live forever. It doesn't work that way. All we like sheep have gone astray, Isaiah 53 says, right? We have turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord has laid upon him the iniquity of us all. If so be that he find it, if he does find it, if he doesn't find it, well, it's disappointing, right? But it's talking about men, it's an analogy. It is, even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these ones should perish. Meaning, again, one of these little ones, does he mean every child in existence? I don't know. I tend to think not. But then, because like Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. But the children being yet in the womb, having done neither any good or evil. It's because God already knows. Because this is the way he made the world. And some people come out tares. And others come out fruitful. And so what he's saying is like, yeah, that which is lost is very important to God, especially those who believe in him. He doesn't want them to be lost. It is not his will. The conflict. Yes. Well, how can there be anything that's not God's will? Who resists His will? Well, there's different kinds of will. One, there's a will in the sense of desire. God's desires do not necessarily come to pass. That aspect of His will is not always what happens, because He's given us the ability to do things contrary to His desires, contrary to the things He would like to be. But there's also His will in the idea of His determinate counsel and foreknowledge. Will, in the Greek thelema, there are two words, thelema and boulema. And boulema will, I forgot which one's which. Thelema, I think, has something to do with heat and passion. Boulema, I believe, is the one that has to do with resolution. When it comes to His resolute will, what He has decided will be, there is no resisting His will. But when it comes to what He wants to be, and He has left to the circumstances that He has created, meaning, it may not be God's ultimate will for me, but it may be His temporary will. I don't know if that's what I meant. But anyways, I wonder what the will is here. We should just look it up. Verse 14. What we got here? Verse 14, will. It's thelema, which means, I guess I didn't get that right, did I? I'm going to fix this. Okay, unlock. I'm supposed to hide that part. There we go. All right. Not that there's anything embarrassing for me. There we go. Not the will. It's thelema. I clicked on it already. All right, Paul, let's go through here. What time are we at? Oh, we're there. Just about done. That's fine. Thelema. From thelo, desire, wish. Properly, a desire, wish, often refer to God's preferred will. Yeah, as opposed to His determined will. Yeah, it is not His wish. So there is some softer. So that what I mean, like it says, God does not take pleasure in the death of the wicked. But it may be part of His resolute plan that still happens. Yeah, it's a weird thing. We understand in part, we know in part. But then when we see face to face, there'll be no more doubt about what's what. He says, moreover, if your brother trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. And if he hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. Moreover, it's interesting that it connects it with that. But I see a connection in the sense that, when a brother trespasses against you, this is an occasion for stumbling. And also when you tell him his fault, there's an occasion for stumbling there. Be careful. You go between thee and him alone. You tell your brother privately. That's part of that helps him, if there's any pride issue, when it's just one-on-one, it's not too sensitive. It's not public. Some people in a public debate will behave much differently than they would if you were talking to them privately. So it's good to remember that. When you have something against your brother, you should tell him his fault between you and him alone. Now sometimes you have someone who knows what they did and they did wrong against you and stuff. This is about brothers, people who are with you in the faith. Though you can apply it to people outside, there's nothing wrong with talking to someone first. Like if you got, but the thing is, don't let this. I want to just say this: if you're a mandatory reporter, okay, or in an organization that deals with children and child sexual abuse, you don't apply this. If you suspect someone of abusing a child, you go directly to the authorities. You don't tell them between them and themselves. That's a different order. It's like if someone does a murder, you don't go talk to them about it. You go to the police, okay? You do not. This is when someone does something against you. where you have the right to bind and loose, so to speak, meaning they've sinned against you, so you're the offended party. You're the one who needs, that's another sense. When someone trespasses against you, that's an offense, right? And they've set a trap for you. You've fallen into evil, whatever. Set a trap may be a bit, I'm following scandalized too much by its meaning in Greek. It doesn't have to mean that. I say, if a brother trespasses against you, if that's an offense, now it still makes sense, right? But that he stumble not, also considering him, go talk to him between you and him alone. If he hear you, you have gained your brother. And like I said, this is for when someone has done something against you. Maybe they've just been rude to you and they didn't acknowledge it. Or a number of other things where, maybe they don't realize they sin, so you have to tell them. A lot of times people know when people do something on purpose against you, you certainly could try talking to them, but they may just throw it back in your face. In which case you then go on to the next phase, which is 2 or 3 more. Or 1 or 2 more. But so the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word may be established. That goes back to the old law. That, of course, a single witness is not as reliable as 2 or 3. And so you need to have multiple witnesses was part of the standard before you can convict someone, even though that can also be manipulated. But I think that's one of the things. It shouldn't be that easy to manipulate. And you see in their system it's not. Because in their system, when they tried to accuse Jesus, they couldn't get 2 people to agree together. Which is odd. You think it'd be the easiest thing in the world to get 2 people to agree about a story. But because perhaps their law, would, something like arranging it ahead of time is so obviously wrong and evil that perhaps even they did not consider doing that. They wanted to find 2 people that would organically accuse him of the same thing. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it to the church. And this is the first time Jesus ever mentioned the church. So it definitely, tell it to the called out assembly is what ecclesia. Ecclesia means to call. Ek is out, called out. A called out group of people. Unlike synagogue, which is literally a gathering together. But both can refer to the same thing. It's a bunch of people getting together. Either a chosen group of people. It's all your perspective on how you look at them. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. Which is funny to me because Jesus was known for eating with the publicans, right? So, but he's referring to the way they generally treated the publicans, which is they shunned them. And I think he's saying, yes, when a brother refuses to do what's right and refuses to hear and refuses to, like he talks later, say, I repent, you're right, I'm wrong. When they refuse, you should shun them. You cannot allow them to continue in that relationship with that broken part because they're not really part of the kingdom. They're not our brother. We've lost our brother. He's lost. He needs to wander the world like a lost person. Not like he's still at home in the church. And that's the problem in the church. There is a lot of unwillingness to take action against a lot of iniquity going on in the church. And it starts at the top. In the ministry, there's all kinds of iniquity and stuff in this world today. And that's not surprising. And so it's no surprising when it trickles down to the common people. So, and then he goes on to say, and whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now we're over. And that's fine. I think I'm going to pick up with that because I might want to bring that into the next one. So let's just say we're going to pick it up at 18:18 tomorrow. Yeah, that gives us plenty to look at. Until then, remember, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and he is the fulfillment of the law.
But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven. For you neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widows' houses for a pretense, make long Pharaoh